Hi, my name's Tom Shue, and today I want to talk to you about some of the reasons why I absolutely love the Fuji X100S. Okay, now this camera is unlike any other camera I've ever worked with before, and there's a few reasons why. The first reason is it's a mirrorless camera. I don't never shot mirrorless before, and it's kind of quirky. It's got some things that this camera does that are different than any other, even mirrorless cameras, because it's kind of like a rangefinder hybrid. It's not really a rangefinder, but it's close. So you have parallax adjustment error. Um, that you have to consider if you're shooting things close up within 3 feet. But what makes this thing great is it's super sharp. And the reason why it's super sharp is it doesn't have an AA filter. An AA filter stands for anti-aliasing filter, and it's designed and is put on all DSLR cameras to deal with moire pattern. Now, if you don't know what that is, Google it and you'll find out. But basically, cameras have a hard time dealing with these random patterns in life, like checkerboards or stripes or plaids or anything like that. So they put in these glass filters to deal with that. Well, this camera doesn't have one, so the files are sharp. The next thing this camera does is it's how the sensor's constructed. Most cameras out there use what's called a bare array, the way it aligns the pixels on the sensor. The way the X-Trans sensor by Fuji aligns the pixels is more like particles of silver on film emulsion. The silver halide film particles, it's more of a random situation. So check out what this camera does and how it does it. So first off, let's look at this little car here. You can see that it's pretty sharp. This is shot in macro mode at 5.6 and has some really shallow depth of field. Anytime you're dealing with macro, you have narrow depth of field. Not just because it's a macro lens, it's just because of the fact that when you get close to something like that, the depth of field becomes razor thin. So even at 5.6, this thing is really shallow. Let's look at some of the detail here. You can see that the paint chips are there. Like I said, there's like three layers of paint. There's sand particles on the hood. There's some chips in the paint. There's these little air bubbles from the sea foam. Then you got the sand down here. Now this is a raw file, has not been processed. When you process a raw file, you're dealing with a lot more information than the JPEG, so you can really pull out more detail. So let's pop in here and see. Now you can see the paint chips are really pronounced, and the color pops, and those sand particles and bubbles pop. And look at the reflection inside the car. It's just amazing. Even the bubbles back here on this incoming wave. It's just amazing. Now remember, this is a Matchbox car that you could blow up to the size of something that could fit on your wall. Now, this is a wide angle lens. It's equivalent to 35 millimeter, which is pretty wide compared to most DSLR lenses that you might use. And this is 100% crop of this peacock that was sitting on a fence across the walkway. So now look at this. This is to give you an idea how sharp these cameras are. This is an alligator that was shot through a 3-inch piece of Lexan that was dirty. Okay, so whenever you have dirty glass in front of your beautiful lens, you lose contrast. So let's zoom in and take a peek at f2.5. Look at the alligator, the detail, the teeth, the the scales, everything is sharp. The reflection, everything is nice and crisp through a dirty Lexan window, backlit, by the way. So let's look at this next one. This is a Gaboon Viper, again shot through plexiglass. Dirty plexiglass has been scratched up by millions of visitors. And you can see this is a raw file. It's not been touched, but look at the scales in the eyes, pretty sharp. This was shot at a quarter of a second. So any kind of blur at a quarter of a second was me. My inability to hold at a quarter of a second. The reason why it's not sharper than what it is because of me and my lack of being able to hand hold. So here we go. There's at the Natural History Museum in San Diego, they have some skulls and they have some skeletons. This is a skeleton. You can see the texture on this is pretty incredible at f2. Okay, and if you notice it's shot at 1600, there's no noise. This is where that X-Trans sensor comes in. It doesn't have noise. It has grain like film. This is like working with a film camera for me, and this is why I'm so excited. If you look at the skull shot through plexiglass at a seventh of a second, you can see that there's all kinds of dark area, but there's no noise. You normally see chroma noise or that colored pixelated noise. That doesn't exist on this camera. There's been no in-camera noise reduction applied, and there's been no post applied. This is what happens when you apply post. Normally when you push up the shadows in post, you get noise. We don't have noise, we have grain. And this grain comes from Color Effects Pro 4. I've really pushed it up with the detail enhancer. There's a beetle. This is I think they call it a miracle beetle, and this is a pinhead to give you an idea. This thing is very small, shot in macro mode at f4 at 1600. Again, there's no noise. Now I was at a 40th of a second hand holding, so I did lose some. But look, you can see the leg through the transparent body. You see that leg joint? That's underneath of the animal. It's pretty amazing stuff. Let's look how it holds up in the real world. So I shot this scene through the Bellagio Valet, and the reason why I did it is because it was the middle of the day, it was a bright sunny day, and it's backlit. So I shot through, and I focused on this guy over here, and we shot at f2.8. Now you can see that the sun is really, really bright, and if you look at the histogram, there's no spike on the right, so I didn't blow out the highlights. I'm safe. So that means that when I come in and post, if you tried this with a normal DSLR, it wouldn't do it. This almost looks like HDR, but it's not. Look at all the detail I was able to recover in the highlight area, and then look how I pushed up the shadows. Look at this guy. Now there's grain on him, and again, there's been absolutely no noise reduction applied. Let's look at him here. You can see he's completely in silhouette. And there he is. You can see he's got a blue jacket on and a white shirt. He's kind of got brown hair. He's holding a cell phone. Even the signs. Now, it's not a perfect image, but look at the contrast between the brightest portion and the shadow. I was able to control all of that detail by using the RAW file. You'd never get away with that with a JPEG, only with the RAW. Now, I'll show you a couple more things and we'll be done for this. This is a JPEG that Velvia film filter applied to it. And you can see that since all of the processing has been done in camera, the algorithm was a little heavy-handed, maybe because I was a little bit underexposed. But look, all the little fuzzy hairs on this little bitty sunflower are just completely in focus. It's pretty amazing stuff. Shot at f4. Now, if you shoot at f4, you can get some amazing images in macro. But if you decide to shoot at f2, you're going to lose it because it's too shallow. And I'll tell you why. I was pretty interested in this flower when I shot it at f4, but I saw that specular highlight on the water drop, so I thought maybe I'll get the water drop in focus, but let's open up some so we're not so dark. So I went to f2, and we're still shooting at ISO 800, and I zoomed in and tried to focus manually on that water droplet. Now look at this water drop. You can see that what I was focusing on was the contrast elements from the overhead ceiling in the Bellagio atrium. Inside the atrium, there's a big glass dome. This is all the truss work and grid work inside that dome. Look at the detail. That's a JPEG, so it's going to be a little sharper. And here's the RAW version. Let's take a peek at that. Look at the detail inside that surface reflection of the water droplet inside of a flower. Now you notice how fast it falls off. The only thing sharp is in this area, and it starts to fall off because this is the height of the water droplet. F2 is pretty shallow, so use it if you want, but F4 is plenty shallow if you're in macro mode. So that's it. I want to thank you all for taking time today on my blog, and until next time, we'll see you soon.